So you say you want to do alignments yourself, but where do you begin? This is a question I asked myself. Today I'll show you what I've come up with. So I happen to have a lift, but you don't need to have a lift, but you probably want to elevate your car off the ground. I've made these platforms here. These are 3/4 inch plywood, and actually a guy who owned an alignment shop showed me what he had used when he first got started, and I kind of copied it. The rack actually has, in order to be able to stack them when I'm not using them, these panels are removable, and these are supports for the strings, ultimately for measuring toe. They're removable, but since I have it set up, I'm not going to remove it at the moment. Additionally, you need to get something for measuring toe. I happen to have the Tenhulzen Automotive Pro alignment set up, something like $700. I think it's available for less. I got 2 of these camber caster wheel adjustment thingies, wheel mounts rather, and that's what took it up to 700 something. Having both of them is real nice. I've made some wheel slip plates. These are 2 pieces of plastic with grease sandwiched in between them. Super simple. Could do it with 2 pieces of sheet metal. Also, some people use sand. There's a number of ways. I happen to like this just fine. And really, that's about it. So we'll start on the alignment now. I'm going to go ahead and lower the car. Put it on its wheels. As it lowers, we can see the slip plates doing the slipping as the suspension settles. If you're doing this with a lift, I like to leave the lift in place to catch the car in the event anything happens. These supports, I've had 5,000 pound SUVs on here, so they're solid. First thing we're going to do is, now that we've got the car settled on there, I do have the parking brake on, just ever so slightly. We're going to establish our caster. That's step 1. Now with this gauge, there are 2 bevels that you can see near the wheel, and first actually we have to mount it on the wheel. So this is kind of just hanging here. This lower portion, when you set up the adjustability of it, which there's a nut on the back side here, you want to adjust it so that it just comes even with the wheel here. It doesn't quite pop on, and then you stretch it down and pop it onto your wheel and make sure it's uniformly seated. Each of these little fingers, the Tenhulzen setup has really nice little fingers for holding a wheel and not doing any damage. And these are the bevels that I'm speaking of, here and here. These are for indicating your caster. So I'm going to go in the car and first set up, I'm turning the wheel. You can see the slip plate working. I'm turning the wheel so that the bevel on that gauge is aligned with the body, parallel with. And I'd say it's right about there. Now what we're going to do is put our magnetic caster gauge, which you can buy these off of Amazon if you're not using somebody's official setup. I'm going to put it here, and I'm going to 0 it. All right, we're 0'd. Now we'll go, and we're going to turn the wheel so that the other bevel is running parallel with the body. There, we're parallel with the body, right about there. And the gauge is going to indicate how much caster we have. except that we have to multiply it by 2. So 2.65 times 2, that's going to be 6.3, 5.3 degrees of caster, which is the most this car will get. I'm not going to actually do an alignment here, but this is what we would do. Okay, so go ahead and repeat that on the other side. Now I'm going to come back and straighten the wheel back out. All right, the wheel is back to straight. All right, now we're going to measure camber and adjust camber as needed. Let me give a little better camera angle so I'm not standing in front of it. So now we take this wheel mount and we turn it 90 degrees. Don't turn it on the wheel or you're going to scratch up your wheel. But same scenario, you hook the top two and then stretch the last one, put it into place. Then we have our gauge, which I'll power off at the moment, and we're going to zero out that gauge. We need to zero the gauge in order to give us a reference of actually what level the car is at. Now, Tenhulzen suggests using their toe rack as a level. I suppose that you could put a nice actual level on the ground, some straight edge to average out between the two wheels, and then turn on the level. And if it's not zeroed, zero it. All right, we're zeroed. Now you need to remember to make sure to leave this gauge facing the same direction all the time. So the display is facing the front of the car, and with that, I'm going to keep it there. Now this is indicating 3.1 degrees of negative camber. So were I to need to adjust that, I would go under the car and adjust the bolts that are for camber, which in this particular car are right here. That's the front of the swing arm there. So if we adjust the front, both sides on the front, then we go to the back and we do the same thing on the back. We mount this wheel mount onto the back wheels and we adjust our camber on the back. Now we're done with that. Now we just have to adjust toe. I find that toe takes the most amount of time of anything, largely because of the setup. You really need to get this right. So I will show you what we are doing here. Let's turn the gauge off. I'm not going to be needing that for a little bit. And for toe, what you need to do is create two lines parallel down the vehicle that are equidistant on both sides. So the track of your car may not be the same front to rear, so the same number front to rear, front and rear doesn't apply. But you do need the same number front to front and rear to rear. And what I mean by the same number is, I've got this front, just making sure we're in camera here. I've got our two alignment racks measured out to be the exact same length. And what I mean is if you place them up face to face, this end and this end match front to rear. And for easy reference, I have various cars that I do alignments on kind of marked out. And what you want to do to determine a width is kind of when you get this wheel gauge on here, you just make sure that whatever the width is falls within your range of measurement, which would be these little ruler deals here. So we're going to measure our left. We're going to center this string setup side by side, side to side. And this is actually the part that I find to be the most tedious of it all. So I take a metric ruler because it's easier to read numbers. That seems ridiculous, but when you're trying to go back and forth and determine how much you need to move it, it's a heck of a lot easier using the metric system. So we're at 230 millimeters over here. You want to go off of a uniform face. So you can see I'm off the face of the wheel there, and the string knocks it at 230. We'll come over to the other side. And we're at 220. So we know we need to move this direction 5 millimeters. So if I give it a little bit of a nudge, pull it over 5 millimeters, that's about 225. So with any luck, we're 225 on the other side. Pretty close. Just need to move a millimeter in and we'll be set. So do this to the rear also. So once I've got that centered, I come to the rear, I check it, I go this side, then I go to the other side and do the same thing. So once I have all that set, a trick I've learned through screwing this up a few times is I take these clamps and I'll clamp down my Tenhulzen tow thing. There are other setups like smart strings which mount to your vehicle. I do alignments on a number of different cars, my own, and those are kind of vehicle specific, so I kind of like this little more universal setup. So I have these spring clamps and I clamp down my thing. This way when I'm going under the car to make adjustments and I bump it, it's not going anywhere. So we'll clamp down front and rear. And now we have parallel lines running down the sides of the car. Establishing a height on the Tenhulzen setup, I should say, for this string here, you basically kind of, personally, I just mount the wheel and then pick a height that is close to, I mount the wheel thing, and then I pick a height that's close to, that puts the ruler right near the string. So for this particular car, it's at 5 or 5.5. Either way, 5.5 might be better. I have a little bit of space between the string and the ruler. It doesn't really matter. It's just that you want to make a easier measurement. So actually, I'll lower that down to 5.5. I'll just do it on this one, but you would do it on all corners. So this is kind of you stretch a little plastic, put it in the groove, and then release it. It's kind of a springy tension thing. All right, so at 5.5, I'm not going to do the other side right now, but we can see that the string is sitting basically on the ruler, and it's really easy to measure. So now what we're doing is establishing tow on the vehicle. So what we'll do is we have this wheel thingy mounted with the ruler sticking out. Yeah, wheel thingy is the technical term for this, so don't leave me any comments that it's something other than it's the official term, wheel thingy. So now what we're going to do is center the wheel, make sure that we are straight how we're going to want it, and we're way off. So let's center that up. Probably a little off still. I think that's good. And we're going to come over here and read. Now again, I started out doing this using inches because whenever you get the specs on a vehicle, they tell you a 1/16 of total tow or a 1/4 inch of total tow. I find it aggravating as hell to read the 64ths rulers doing that. So I just convert to millimeters, 1/4 inch being 6 millimeters roughly, and then I just go off the metric one. Heck of a lot easier, less thinking, and I'm just a dumb mechanic, so I need less thinking. Anyway, so here we can see with the wheel centered, we're reading 94 4 millimeters and 100 millimeters there. So that is indicating toe. And if we go on the other side, we are indicating, I should lower these, but we're indicating about 98 millimeters, and down at the other end, whatever it is, it doesn't matter because we didn't square up the strings. But anyway, what our goal here is to adjust your tie rod end lengths, or your tie rod ends rather, right here, and you're going to adjust it to achieve your total desired toe. On this car, I'm actually running 0 toe in the front, and I would also measure toe in the rear. So I would move the wheel thingy to the rear, measure toe in the rear, and in this circumstance, I run 1/4 inch of toe in the rear, or 6 millimeters, roughly. But yeah, and so once you're done measuring toe, then you just take it all off. Now, a lot of people will tell you you need to roll the car back and forth to settle the suspension. I've done a ton of alignments and have not done that. I mostly don't do it because my setup here doesn't allow for it. It would roll right off the platform. But I haven't found that after I do an alignment, I go drive it, I come back, if I set it back up, the alignment hasn't changed. And so rolling back and forth is probably nice if your slides aren't free to allow everything to move, which might give you an off reading. But for me, the rolling back and forth isn't something I can do, and it turns out that it's not necessary. Anyway, hope this works out for you or gives you some ideas on how to make an alignment setup of your own. And peace. Please subscribe. More videos like this to come.